frozen curse. A polar bear's wound and the plague of whale lice. The Arctic is a land of silence, a kingdom of ice and hunger, where the sun vanishes for months, and survival is a daily battle against the cold, the wind, and the merciless bite of starvation. Here, on the frozen shores of the north, a great beast lumbers forward, its massive paws crunching against the ice, breath steaming in the frigid air. A polar bear, the apex predator of this world, a hunter built for the cold, but something is wrong, for on its side the fur is missing. Beneath the thick white coat, where there should be nothing but dense muscle and pure power, there is a wound unlike any seen before. It isn't a simple cut or the claw mark of a rival bear. No, this is something far more grotesque. The flesh has collapsed inward, forming a deep, cratered hole, as if something has been eating away at it from the inside. The edges of the wound are pitted like a honeycomb, tiny tunnels carved through the skin, dripping with infection. And from within those tunnels, if one looks close enough, if one dares, something moves. This is not just the scar of battle. This is a doorway into a far deeper horror, the hidden nightmare beneath the fur. A wound like this could start in many ways. Maybe a failed hunt, where a desperate bear lunged at a walrus, only to be met with a thrashing tusk that left a deep gash in its side. Or perhaps an old injury from a brutal fight with another male, a reminder of a battle fought over food, territory, or the chance to mate. But this wound has been festering, and the longer it remains open, the more it invites something else, something that thrives on decay, that burrows into flesh, that makes its home inside the rotting body of a living giant. We are talking about parasites, not the kind that simply crawl over the skin, not the kind that linger in fur like fleas or ticks. No, these creatures want more than that. They want a home beneath the surface. And for that, we must look to the oceans. Whale lice, the crawling plague. Imagine a flea the size of a coin, a creature with hooked claws like jagged needles, its body flattened and hard like a beetle's shell. Its legs are twisted, grasping, built for clinging to rough, moving skin. And its mouth, a nightmare of sharp, slicing mandibles, perfect for scraping, cutting, and feeding on whatever dead or dying flesh it can find. These are whale lice. They are not insects. They are crustaceans, more closely related to crabs than to lice. Yet they behave with the same relentless hunger. They live on whales, digging themselves into the folds of blubber, hiding in the cracks of scars, feeding off peeling skin and open wounds. To them, a whale is not an animal. It is a landscape, a floating world of living, breathing flesh that they carve into, one tiny bite at a time. A single whale can carry hundreds of thousands of them. Imagine an entire colony of these creatures swarming over an animal's body, never letting go, each one feasting, breeding, multiplying. Some species of whale lice are specialized, evolving to latch onto specific types of whales, clinging to their hosts for years, for an entire lifetime if they are lucky. But sometimes, just sometimes, they don't stay where they belong when the sea creeps onto land. Whales die, and when they do, their carcasses drift, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, until they finally wash ashore. A feast for scavengers. Birds peck at the soft parts. Wolves and bears rip into the exposed blubber. But they are not the only ones who come to feed. The lice come too. With their host gone, they have nowhere left to go. But parasites do not simply die. They survive. They survive. They crawl. They search. And if an unfortunate scavenger happens to take a bite from the wrong part of a rotting whale, well, those tiny clawed creatures find themselves a new home. A polar bear is a powerful beast, but it is not invincible. It can be wounded. And if a bear, desperate for food, sinks its teeth into a decaying whale carcass infested with lice, some of those lice might seize the opportunity to latch onto a new host. Unlike the thick, smooth skin of a whale, a bear's body is different. It is covered in fur, and its wounds do not close as easily as those of a sea creature built for pressure and deep diving. The lice, once inside an open wound, dig in, they settle, they breed. And the result? The horror we see before us, the honeycombed, festering wound, the tunnels burrowed into living flesh, the restless twitch beneath the skin. A polar bear does not scratch the way a dog might scratch at fleas. It bites, it tears at itself in frustration, gnawing at the itch, at the feeling of something writhing inside. And in doing so, it makes the wound worse, ripping it open, exposing more flesh, inviting more infection. If the bear is lucky, its immune system fights back. The lice die off, the wound scabs over, and eventually it heals, though the scars remain. If it is not lucky, the infection spreads. The bear grows weaker, and in the unforgiving Arctic, weakness is a death sentence. Nature has no mercy, but it has a sense of humor. Parasites have been around for millions of years, and they are not going anywhere. Every great beast, from the soaring eagle to the mighty bear, is a host to something smaller, something hungrier, something patient. It is a dark, brutal part of nature. But if there is one thing to take away from this, it is this. It could be worse, because as horrifying as it is to imagine lice burrowing into a bear's wounds, there is something even worse in the animal kingdom. There are parasites that take control of their hosts' minds, parasites that force their victims to drown themselves, parasites that live inside eyes. Compared to that, a few whale lice don't seem so bad. At least they don't make you want to jump into the ocean. The ocean's next horror, sea lice, and the hidden nightmare beneath the waves. Nature doesn't care about suffering. It doesn't care about pain or dignity. It only cares about survival. And for every great predator, for every towering beast that dominates its world, there is something smaller, something persistent, something that exists only to cling, to burrow, to feed. We have seen how whale lice infest the giants of the sea, how they turn the wounds of polar bears into grotesque honeycombs of pain and infection. But parasites are never satisfied. They are everywhere, in every corner of life, waiting for the right host, the right moment to dig in. And if you thought whale lice were bad, you haven't seen what lurks in the fish farms and open waters of the deep. Because there is something else, another parasite, smaller, faster, and just as relentless. Sea lice, the flesh eaters of the ocean. Picture this, a school of salmon, sleek and strong, gliding through the cold currents. They are built for speed, for endurance, for the endless journey from river to ocean and back again. But not all of them will make it. Some are already doomed. Some are already carrying passengers they cannot shake. Clinging to their scales, gripping tight with tiny hooked legs, are the killers, sea lice. These parasites are not actual lice. Much like their whale-loving cousins, they are crustaceans, but they are smaller, more vicious, and far deadlier to their hosts. Sea lice latch onto fish and dig into their skin, scraping away the protective slime coat, burrowing deep, feeding on flesh. For a fish, this is a slow death. The wounds don't heal, they grow, they fester. The skin peels back, the raw flesh exposed to the open water, to bacteria, to infection. Some fish end up so ravaged by lice that their entire heads turn into open sores, their eyes swollen, their bodies stripped down to red, bleeding tissue. A fish weakened by sea lice loses its ability to swim properly. It slows down, it tires easily. And in the wild, a slow fish is a dead fish, a sitting target for larger predators. But the worst part, this isn't just happening in the open ocean anymore. It is happening in places we have built, in places where we think we control nature. The breeding grounds of horror, fish farms. In the wild, a single infected fish might spread its parasites to a few others before being eaten. But in a fish farm, where thousands of salmon are packed together in tight, enclosed pens, there is nowhere to run, there is no escape. Here, sea lice thrive. They breed in unnatural numbers, jumping from fish to fish, overwhelming entire populations. It starts with a few, then dozens, then hundreds, until suddenly, entire schools of farmed salmon are crawling with parasites, their skin shredded, their bodies wasted away. And when these infected fish escape, or when the sea lice drift out of the pens into the open ocean, wild salmon passing by become the next victims. Birds, larger fish, even bears, all of them depend on salmon for survival. But if the fish are dying before they can even complete their life cycle, if they are too weak to swim back to their spawning grounds, the entire ecosystem suffers. And that brings us to the truly disturbing part, the solutions. Chemical warfare against a parasite army. Fish farmers have waged war against sea lice for years. But the parasites are winning. The first solution was simple. Chemicals. Bathing fish in pesticide-laced water to kill the lice before they could do too much damage. But parasites, like all living things, adapt. And the lice that survived these treatments passed on their resistance to the next generation. Then came the mechanical removers. High-pressure water jets designed to blast the lice off the fish. Effective, but brutal. Many fish don't survive the process. Next, farmers turn to a more natural solution, cleaner fish, species like Ross, and lumpfish that eat sea lice off infected salmon. But even they can't keep up. The lice multiply too fast. The fish can't eat them all. And now, some farms have turned to a